Hello and welcome, everyone. Hopefully you are all here for the webinar. We're at the top of the hour here and we've got quite a lot to cover off. So I'm going to start any second now. We've still got a few attendees I can see joining just now. Hopefully you're all here for the Inoapps Workforce Planning webinar. We are going to be going for about 30 minutes. I'm going through some PowerPoints and positioning, and then hopefully we're going to get to see some of the bits and pieces that I've been talking about in action as part of a live demonstration. You should all be obviously using the GoToWebinar toolbar there on your right-hand side. You are able to ask questions and raise your hand metaphorically there to post any questions that you might have, so please do feel free to interact. But I'm going to kick off right now and we're going to start the webinar. Okay, very quickly, my name is Ed Jevons. I'm the Global Head of EPM Division at Inoapps. EPM is Oracle terminology for Enterprise Performance Management, and the planning and budgeting side of the solutions that Oracle provide falls under that banner. So suffice to say, I've been working with Inoapps for 2.5 years now. Prior to that, I was with Accenture, and prior to that, I was with another niche partner specializing in the Oracle solution set, specifically around planning and workforce planning. So I've got some consultancy background in there as well. Hopefully I can do a good job today talking you guys through some of the features that you might be needing in your business around workforce planning. So who are Inoapps versus Oracle? Oracle are obviously the software vendor. So they're the people that will, for example, host the cloud applications that we're going to be talking about today. Inoapps is a partner of Oracle. Oracle has various tiers of partner. We're right up there at the top as a platinum partner. And we have locations across the globe, as you can see from the graphic in front of you there. We started out in Aberdeen and we broadened down across the border there. We now have 4 offices in the UK. Our headquarters is out of London. We also have offices in Houston and Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. That allows us to provide that follow the sun support whilst also servicing customers in those regions. You can see a little timeline along the bottom there. We've been around for about 10 years now, providing services around Oracle applications, technology, and hardware. And we essentially do only Oracle and everything Oracle. There's various other little key stats there on the side that I'm not going to go through and bore you with, but we're about 300 plus staff globally now, the vast majority of whom are consultants on site delivering projects around Oracle solutions, implementing those for the customer. So Oracle make the solution, and then we come in, configure that to your requirements, and we actually do that implementation for you. That's where we fit. What do we actually specialize in? Well, there's various different areas of Oracle's software as a service or SaaS applications that you can see up the top there. There's the human capital management, the HCM side of things, the ERP or enterprise resource planning, and the EPM or enterprise performance management piece. Now, obviously, we're only going to be concentrating on this right-hand side today, specifically the planning and budgeting, that second circle along around the clock there within the EPM cloud. The point of this slide is more to let you know that we have a quite broad focus and that there's lots of different integrated applications there. We've won various different accolades over the years. One of our most recent was coming into the 1,000 Companies to Inspire Britain 2017 this year. I'm most proud, I suppose, we are the 2016-17 winner of Oracle's Specialized Partner of the Year as a SaaS Cloud Transformation Partner. So that's a global award that was given to us above and beyond some very big SIs, so we're very proud of that one. And just shows some of our prowess within the ability to assist with implementing these tools in a transformational setting. So workforce planning, what's it all about? Well, workforce planning, we could probably break it down to a few of these bullet points here. The connection between HR and finance can often be strained within an organization, not relationship speaking, but just the transfer of information. So we've encountered several instances over the years where, for example, HR might have a different list of employees that finance does. And therefore, when you're trying to budget the cost at the beginning of the year, or maybe you're planning intra-month, that becomes quite difficult to do. So what we want to do is create a solution that is able to take that data directly from whatever your HR or your HCM system is, and then we can use that to populate your financial models going forward. So any projections that you're doing. For example, you might want to be projecting growth, and you might be projecting growth in a certain area. You might want to know who's in that area right now, and then who will you need to add on top of what's existing in your current HR system in order to reach those growth levels. You might want to increase salaries in a certain region and not another, do some modeling, see how that pans out. So it's very important that we kind of tie that knot and we connect that gap there between the HR systems and the finance systems. And that's something that we absolutely think that the planning and budgeting solution that we're going to be looking at today will be able to assist you with. So there's various other points here that we're going to go into a little bit more detail in just a second on a step-by-step view of the world. But suffice to say, we can do lots of different things like plan transfers from one department to another, plan for people's leave of absence or maternity. We can plan for different tax and pay structures in different areas. And we can bring in that data directly from that source system, or indeed disparate source systems. If you have more than one HR system in different departments or geographies, etc., we're able to combine some of that as well and pull in data from those different sources, yet have a single source of the truth for your planning model. So there's never any argument anymore or any disparity between the model that HR owns and that finance owns. We've got some references here. So planning and budgeting cloud service is the solution we're going to be taking a look at today, abbreviated to PBCS. So it's Oracle's cloud offering for planning and budgeting. And within that, we've got some very nice functionality around this workforce planning specifically. But indeed, it's a far wider scoped application. And here are some of the implementations that we have performed just in logo format. Obviously, we don't have time to talk through any of these in great amount of detail, but if anyone wants to hear a little bit more about someone they see that they know as a peer in their industry, we'd be more than happy to talk them through that. These here span a couple of continents here. We've also got some in the Far East that aren't on this slide right now as well. But suffice to say, we have some good referenceability in that area. So enterprise management, what is it? Well, it's an interconnected and integrated suite of products that deals with everything from that subledger close through to the financial filing, and then any planning and budgeting and modeling that you might want to do therefore going forward. So we're going to be looking at just the planning and budgeting side of things today, but suffice to say, what we're trying to do really is give people visibility within the organization. So we want to move people away from spreadsheets where people are making very guesses and move them into a little bit more. Some of the problems that we tend to see when we approach an organization that's looking at putting in a planning and budgeting solution rather than moving from spreadsheets. They might have lots of different spreadsheets that they maintain at the moment, and they've all got different audiences or different approval hierarchies or different readerships, and none of them are actually linked. So your headcount plan over here isn't linked to your annual plan and forecast necessarily, which isn't on par or in parity with your long-term planning. So in isolation, these spreadsheets can be very good, but when it comes to a kind of top-down approach, these can be quite problematic, and you'll get some of these issues along the left. You'll get silos of data, you'll get lots of different individuals maintaining their own plans rather than centralizing that and having it standardized. That standardization of metadata can become an issue if someone adds a new cost center and names it something different to someone else subtly within another spreadsheet. The actual ownership of a spreadsheet can be quite ambiguous, so you can pop them onto a SharePoint, obviously, but those aren't the most easy to use and collaborative tools that we have access to. And of course, from a formatting, when it comes to the reporting perspective, if everyone's got their own Excel sheet, you might find some discrepancies therein as well. The auditability and the traceability of these changes that you make within a spreadsheet can be quite difficult to look at a high level. It's difficult to see, show me everyone that made a change in the last 2 hours, for example, across all these different spreadsheets. It would take a lot of work in order to be able to determine that. And of course, they are quite inefficient when they get large. We've all opened a spreadsheet that's several tens of thousands of lines, and that takes quite a while and kills your laptop on the way to doing so. So those are some of the issues that we have. Now, we would purport that there is a better way to do that. So Oracle's planning and budgeting cloud service, we've got over 3,000 customers now. This is slightly out of date, and over 130,000 end users using Oracle's cloud version of this software alone. It's actually built on the old Hyperion technology, which has been around for over 15 years. So there's over 15 years of product innovation there behind the scenes. And again, more than about 5,000, I think, customers used Hyperion over its life cycle. So it's a very well established name, and I'm sure some of you may have heard of it before. It's been around for quite a while now in its cloud form, so since 2014, February 14th. So we've got some, this isn't a cutting edge, bleeding edge release. We've got some good referenceability and some good stability there in as well. And it can be used by any number of different industries and indeed use cases. So we're only talking about industries down here, but we're also going to be looking at it for vertical use cases and horizontal plays. For example, the workforce planning that we're going to be looking at today. So what are some of the good things about this? Maybe not so much specific to HR at this stage, but these are good nonetheless. The fact that we can centrally store data, everyone's looking at the same number when they look at a particular point of the database. So it's not like we're looking at different out-of-date spreadsheets or out-of-sync spreadsheets. You've got centrally administered structures. That is to say, if I add a new cost center into one area of the model, everyone then gets to benefit from that cost center and see and have visibility of that. You've got a single place to actually provision and amend all your security. So depending on how you want to provide access to your users, and of course with HR and payroll related data, that's going to be very sensitive indeed. You're able to do that from one place. There's some best practice out of the box applications, such as the workforce module that we're going to be looking at in just a second. And indeed, you can also augment the reporting that comes out of the box, augment the PDF reporting and the web reporting by being able to connect directly through Microsoft Office applications such as most prominently Excel, but indeed also PowerPoint and Microsoft Word. Finally, when it comes to the source systems, we've referred a little bit at the beginning to the fact that we can connect this in to various other different systems, be that HR system. You might want to connect this up to Workday or another HR system. You might have Oracle as your HR system, or Oracle as your ERP or eBusiness Suite or Sage or whatever it happens to be. We can connect to any third-party source system. Indeed, if that happens to be Oracle, then that's very, very simple. If it happens to be a third-party source system, then indeed we also have an integration tool built into the product that allows us to do that. So we're going to have a demonstration in just a second. Just before we do that, though, I wanted to talk through a couple of the different things that we're going to be taking a look at. So within this demo, we're going to see that we've got some predefined HR task lists, and we'll come on to that piece of terminology in just a second, but effectively workflows that allow us to engage in the HR planning related tasks. We've got pre-built dimensionality, which is suitable for that sort of data. So you could think of the dimensionality in this case as the kind of axis along your spreadsheet. Within our model, we have what's called a multi-dimensional model. So we have more than just the columns and the rows that you would within a spreadsheet. And it's all been pre-set up specifically for that HR type information. We've got pre-built integrations to Oracle HCM Cloud, Oracle HCM on-premise as well, and several other flat file integrations for third-party systems. For example, we have integrated this previously with the likes of Workday, so that would be one that you would get out the box if you like. All that calculation logic, all those sums, etc., that make up your employee costs. For example, knowing how to deduct the tax correctly, depending on whether or not someone was on a leave of absence or a disability leave, etc. Any of that business logic already been built into the system. Being able to plan for people who are both hourly and salary, and having all the calculations reflect those changes, that's all been built in as well. We've also got pre-built business rules in there, or calculations, effectively workflow processes that allow you to move individuals from one department onto another. And indeed, you can plan for unknown resources, i.e. to be hired, through the out-the-box functionality as well. Finally, we've got some reports that we can generate directly out of the system that show us some financial and human resource related KPIs. So those indeed would be useful as well to any organization thinking of using this for their workforce planning. And of course, we've got some dashboards in there as well. And if we have time in the demo, I'm going to show some examples of how easy to use those are. It's important to note that everything that we're going to be talking about today could be either HR or finance owned. This is not something that would require you to involve lots of effort from IT, namely because we're going to be looking at a cloud version of the software here today rather than an on-premises version of the software. You might hear the word cloud banded around quite a bit when it comes to IT solutions. Suffice to say, there's a few different reasons why we think it might be a little bit different from on-premises, and for the most part better. I'll quickly whiz through these. From a procurement perspective, you used to buy on-premises license once off a sales guy, and they would disappear off into the night, and you'd be left with those licenses and pay a maintenance fee year on year. Now you have the joy of being able to buy them and turn them off whenever you like. So you're paying a subscription service. You'll be paying a per user per month fee, and there's obviously no hardware onto which you need to install these. And if you want to turn off your application at any point, you could just export out the data, and outside of your contract, you would be able to cancel that just like with a mobile phone. The time to value, we believe, has increased because you don't have to provision up hardware, buy in hardware, find some server space, and do all that plumbing internally now. What you've actually got is an email will come to you saying your service is ready within a few days, and then you would be able to log on and start using it immediately and start your implementation. So the implementation cycles are a lot quicker as a result. And finally, from an innovation perspective, obviously, if you're maintaining your software on premises on your own hardware, for example, you are responsible for doing the upgrades, and those could be in the old on-premises world quite difficult to do in terms of moving hardware, upgrading underlying databases, and making those upgrades would typically only occur every 3 to 5 years, just because it was quite a task to do. On the cloud, you're always on the latest version. Just like if I go to Amazon.com, I'm not on the 2015 version of the website. I'm always on the most latest version of that. So just a few different benefits, and just maybe to cut through some of the terminology there that you may have heard before. Right. With that said, with time ticking, I'm going to jump into a live demonstration. What does the application actually look like? So I've got nothing running down here that's running this application anyway, other than the browser. So I've jumped into Firefox. You could use Chrome, Safari, Internet Explorer, whatever your corporate standard was out of the aforementioned. And I've logged in as myself here, who is an admin. So I've got a few features down here like tools and application approvals that not everyone would have, but suffice to say, this is the view that I would get when I first logged in. So a couple of things to point out. Firstly, I've got a personalized message for me, which is fully configurable. So in this case, it's just saying welcome to the demo, but indeed that could be pertinent to a specific user, a specific user's role, or indeed a time of the year. For example, if we're entering a budgeting period, we might put some useful to remember dates there, for example. In addition, it's also going to tell me if there's any tasks that are due, and we'll come on to the concept of tasks in just a second, but effectively any process within the planning and budgeting cycle could be identified as a task, and indeed we could put a due date against it. So you can see I'm hideously over date, or out of date, should I say, with several of these tasks here, so I shall go in and try and make amends for that in just a second. One of the reasons that we've got quite a blocky format here is because this is exactly the same view that you would get if you were accessing this from your iPad, or indeed an Android device, or indeed your mobile phone. As long as it was HTML5 compliant, or on one of the browsers that was aforementioned, you would be fine to log in, and this is the view you would get. So it's suitable for a touch screen, basically. So I'm going to jump right into these tasks here. Like I said, we have a concept of task lists within the solution. Any step of a budgeting or planning process could be broken down and considered a task. So for example, that might be updating the standard pay grade salary. So, you know, a grade F earns X amount per year, a grade E earns Y, etc., etc. So that might be a task, just to update those in the table. Another task might be planning for any maternities or disability leave for my department for the year. And indeed, that would be another task. And I could bundle those tasks up into what we call task lists, and you can see I've got a few here. I've got one here called update plan, which I'll jump into there, and as I choose that, it only shows me the tasks that are pertinent to that task list. You can see there's a concept of them being completed or otherwise. The ones with the little green ticks have been completed. The ones with the red exclamation marks there are the ones that haven't been. And indeed, I can come in and just take a very quick snapshot of how am I doing there with respect to task status. I've got a few that are complete, some that are in the future to be completed, and some that are overdue, so I need to do those right now, today. As you can see, there is a start and end date that you can attribute to each of these tasks. So if it was on an annual basis, I might have a particular window in which I wanted people to interact with their HR plan. If it was a rolling monthly task that I need to do, i.e. plan for any new hires every month, then I could have that so that that's cycled automatically. And indeed, I can attach instructions in the form of a little pop-up window for each of these that give me the instructions of what I'm supposed to do for each of those tasks. So this is the user interface that your employees would see if they were interacting with this system. So if we actually click on something, let's actually look at some of the HR related planning within here, and let's plan for some of our employees here and their salaries. So very deliberately supposed to look here more or less like an Excel spreadsheet, although we've got some things that make it a little bit easier for us to model. So what do we first have? I've got 4 people in this specific entity that I'm looking at right now. Now that could be a department, that could be a subdivision, that could be an entire legal entity. It depended how you segmented out your entities within your business. So whatever you did operationally could be mirrored within the system here. I'm looking at this East Council right now. I've got a particular year that I'm looking at. Then I have a concept of a scenario and a version. Without going into lots of detail, the system allows you to do lots of different versions of your plan. So I could have a best case, a worst case scenario. I could have, for example, a working in progress version. I could have a final version, etc., etc. So you're able to maintain all those different cuts of the data, if you like, and just pivot between them at a glance. So I click on the little pencil along here. I can very quickly, for example, flick from one region to another. So I could go from East Council to the West Council. I'll leave it where it is right now because we've got some nice data to look at here. So we've got my employees down the side here. I can see what their job role is. I can see what their salary basis is, what the salary is indeed, and various other key facts going along all the way to across the right here. We've got some override and some performance-based merit in here as well, which is quite nice. So if you wanted to apply, for example, a bonus, a bell curve bonus type structure to your employees within your division, you could do that. You could do it at a far higher level, you could do it at entire company level, but the point is you would be able to maintain these percentages individually by individual employee. And all that logic is pre-set up for you out the box. Looking down at the bottom here, the second form, this sub form here, is concentrating on the one employee here, Deborah Nelson, and I'm able to see for Deborah, what is her salary, what's her pay type, etc., and in what months is she getting that salary in. So we can see that she's active through the months of January through May, but come June, she's actually being transferred out to another department. If we were to look at George Cook, for example, I could go and calculate his compensation out, and we can see what his pay looked like, how it was built up in terms of salary, any adjustments to that salary, any taxes, etc. We can see the entire period, and he's taking a sabbatical in the month of June. If I wanted to plan for a new status change, for example, February, we could just right click on him there, and I could say that we're going to change his employee status. And in the month of February, let's say that we want him to go on a leave of absence. So we'll put that in the month of Feb, and we'll say he's going to do that for 2 months. And then I could put some commentary as to why he's doing this, and I can put some reasoning in there that we could come back and report on later. And I'll launch that business process, and that business process will go away and it'll calculate out for him that in February, for 2 months, he's on a leave of absence. And what the system has been set up to do is it's going to remove his salary. He doesn't get paid salary, but we might have a policy within this department that leave of absence, we will still pay their healthcare costs if it's less than 3 months, for example. So that business logic is built into the spreadsheet. I can't get that wrong. I can't accidentally muck that up, even if I try, because the system does it for me. All I did was chose the action. Similarly, if we wanted to pick on George again, we can actually transfer him from one department to another. So I could say we're going to transfer him, and in the month of October, we'll choose this time. I want to move him to another department. So let's pick October, and then we'll pick the department that we want him to go to. And I can click on my little tree diagram here, and I can see all the different departments with their full code name there as appears within the system. And I'm going to move him to this next division along, which I believe was the West Council there. And I'm going to click on OK. And then again, I can put some justification in there and put some commentary in there. I'm going to click on launch, and you'll see that that moves our man there away to another department. So his costs will no longer be reflected within my division over here in the East Council. However, if I went and then checked on the West Council there, we would probably find, all being well, that George had some costs associated with him therein. So you can see we've got George again, and his costs start within this new division, this West Council, from the month of October onwards. So just an example about some of the planning that we can do for existing employees and their changing of statuses and their movement between different divisions. If I click on next, we can also plan for new hires. So within my system, I've got the ability to plan for hiring requisitions, so I can add a new one at the click of a button. I just right click there and I go add a to be hired. I'm going to add a salaried guy. Let's say it's going to come up with a wizard again, and I just need to choose all the options. So it's going to be a contractor, for example, 1 FTE. They're going to start in, I don't know, say October to replace George. They're going to have an individual health plan. I could put in some comments there. I could choose their tax region, and we could have as many of those set up as you wanted. And once I'd filled in all my information, I could click on launch there and create my new hiring requisition number 3. It should come up as here. There you can see. So that person is getting 30 grand starting out of October. And the important thing is all these costs will be rolling up. So now if I went and did a full P&L for my business, I would see that my hiring requisition number 3 that I just planned for would be included in that. So there's some quite versatile functionality. Obviously, we're not scratching the surface of it really within here, given the time constraints, but I wanted to give a flavor for some of the things that you might be performing in Excel just now. Now, speaking of Excel, I referred earlier to the fact that we had an integration with Excel, very tight integration with Microsoft Office, in fact, and I'll show a quick example of that just here. So within the model itself, I'm actually able to open up any of those folders and get to any of those task list items from a little Excel interface here. So I could go into my workforce, for example, and I could look at my existing employee status, one of the things that we were just taking a look at in that previous view of the world. And when I click on open form, what it's going to do is it's going to open that form within the Excel. So I'm now able to kind of review any data that I might have within the model from within Excel. And this is a live and two-way system, albeit, so I could plan back and forth. I could use Excel as my entry point as well as a reporting point, and I can submit data back into the system. Just want to take a very quick look at some of the other bits and pieces that you might want to look at out of the box. If you're looking for a more visual and dashboard filled view of the world, we have that available as well. So we've got some compensation planning here and some KPIs that we're looking at. We've got the number of existing employees versus new employees within a given plan. What's the actual compensation there versus the plan? What's that in terms of a percentage change, etc., etc. I can then see from a compensation perspective, how does that break down? What if it was total? What if it was tax? What if it was benefits? What if it was total salary, etc.? What if it was basic salary? So I've got this sort of level of detail and reporting out of the system. I can then come through and I've got various different tasks down the side here. I can look at new hires versus existing employees, so I can see some of those hiring requisitions that we've just looked at. I could look at some of my existing employees within my model here already, and we can see what's the expenses trend look like, what does the expenses summary look like for any of these, and we can see some of the key facts for each and every one of our members of staff. We can also take a look at the area of the employee details themselves, so I can see if there's any skill sets that we want to record for a specific employee, and indeed we could choose one here and see if we had any data for those. And these could be project specific, these could be job specific, etc., etc. So there's various different metrics by which we can start to look at our employees. We can actually transfer those from one to another. We've already seen that in that previous example. We can set some assumptions there as well. How many hours per day, how many hours per week, and we can do those by different years. We could do those by different entities. It might be that you have a different working week in one region to another, for example. So just some of the different screens that we have pre-built within the model, some of the areas that we find that people like to report around. We can set up those grades tables that I talked about earlier. So what's the salary basis for a specific grade? What are the what's the actual remuneration for each of those grades there, and what's the rates there? And we can maintain those tables therein. And then finally, final piece of the example there would be looking at which of these different job roles, what's the assumption of the grade that that person would come in at. And we have a whole bunch more of other pre-defined content you can see along the top here. We've got the expense breakdown, so we can see how do the expenses break out by individual job role. We've got the total training expenses, for example, and indeed we've got some other reports available where we can actually start to plan and enter some expenses. What do we think the training expense is going to be within a given month? And I can enter those just by typing within the cells here. and you'll see the cells go yellow. And then when I'm happy with that, I could actually save that data back into the form, and it's going to save up that information and add that to my plan. We can also do some more strategic modeling around where do we think we're going to have headcount gaps, where do we think we're going to need to bring in more individuals due to attrition, etc. And we can measure all this within these dashboard views of the world. Now, all of these are, of course, configurable. We can enter the assumptions there for where we believe there's going to be attrition by year, by individual job role. And all of this would be available to you, but would be configured to your specific requirements. And that's really what takes place during the implementation itself. Now, I'm conscious there's quite a lot of information to go through in a very short period of time. But hopefully some of the areas that we're looking at here, some of the areas around the expense planning, the planning for attrition, the planning for transfer of employees, the planning for training and upskilling of employees, the planning for regulars versus contractors versus perms versus temps, etc. Hopefully some of this resonates with you if you've been struggling to do some of these tasks in an Excel-based world. And if that is the case, then we're pretty certain that we've got a solution for you. So we would just invite you to come to us and ask any questions that you might have. I'm going to quickly take a look, conscious we've just gone past the bottom of the hour here, and we haven't had any questions come through from the audience here. So, and I'm going to say my goodbyes. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch at info@inoapps.com. Thank you very much, and I'm going to stop the webinar.